why is it important for us to raise concerns on devolution when it's only 4 months old in terms of practice? So in this research, there are many findings, as you can see, based on devolution and the whole principle of public participation. And we'll just focus on those two, devolution and public participation. What have we come up with? There are many findings, as I've said, but I'm only going to say 3 because on Monday and Tuesday, we will have a national conference to which you are all very invited and in which we shall discuss other findings. So I'll just give 3 key findings, and then you can raise questions after that, just to help us understand. And these 3 findings, I'll call them like a password to understanding the booklet you have. If you want to interrogate it, then the 3 findings I'm going to mention will help you or will help us to understand how to interpret the whole document. So the question we are addressing is whether there is considerable awareness on the part of us citizens in implementing devolution, because the devolution is now a constitutional requirement, so we are not going back anymore. This country is already developed. We have counties, we have governors, we have National Assembly, the Senate, then we have county assemblies already functional. So the first finding that we are going to focus on is the fact that civic education is critical to the success of the county system. Civic education is critical. We want to argue from the findings that as much as we have this devolution, there is clear evidence that if we don't engage in civic understanding of our obligations and responsibilities, this county system may pick up in a wrong way and eventually may not actually deliver what most of us think are the fruits of devolution. So there is really a risk. There is a risk that the amount of civic education that was given before the elections and the amount of civic education that most of us Kenyans have is below the average, below sustaining this whole idea of devolution. I'll explain that further. The second finding that we want to focus on and insist on as researchers is the fact that reconciliation is a precondition for long-term active participation in nation building. Reconciliation. Our findings, which you have in the booklet, show that at the national level, we have a large percentage of Kenyans who feel something is not right. For some reason, we have Kenyans who still believe that this country needs a reconciliation. Even in some counties, there are some counties that strongly feel that we need reconciliation. And that's an indication, that's an indicator to something deeper. And so we want to insist that based on the findings before you and based on the findings we have, unless this country, as a country, we engage in reconciliation, then we can begin to say that we are raising early warnings that somehow this country may begin to stagger at a certain point unless we go back to the whole idea of reconciliation. Number 3, and I'll stop at that, then I'll explain the 3 points, is a kind of hypothesis, and you'll see that in the findings, that the more access citizens have to government information, the more public participation there will be in the new county structure. There is a correlation we're making that if people have more access to information, government public information, the more they will be able to participate in nation building, whether it's at a national level or whether it's at a county level. Which means, if you put it in the reverse, we're saying that many of us Kenyans feel that we don't have enough information regarding the government or from the government, and therefore even if the Constitution emphasizes public participation, there is a likelihood that we probably will not be as active as those who wrote the Constitution probably required of us. So we need more information to be able to participate. As of now, that seems to be less the case. So those are the three main points I want to raise as key findings. The fact that civic education is low in this country. There is a bit of assumption. There is an assumption that now that we have senators, now that we have governors, we all know what the county system is all about. The local assemblies at the county level will address our issues. But when you confront that with questions, scientific questions, you realize that it's really sand, it's quicksand. There is no substance in terms of us citizens at the county level understanding what's required of us and what's going to be the consequence of that. There are people going to blame their governors, their senators that they are not delivering, when perhaps the issues they are raising are supposed to be addressed by the national government. There are issues that the governors and senators and members of parliament may say that it's not their responsibility, but actually, and then they pass that to the central government, but actually they probably are avoiding their responsibilities. So unless we as citizens understand what is it that we can demand from the county government and not from the national government, or what is it that we can demand from the national government and not the county government, if we keep those roles and functions unclear to ourselves, then how can we talk about public participation? How can we demand accountability and transparency? That may prove in the long term to be a challenge. The other issue I've raised is the issue of reconciliation. As you know, in 2007, 2008, we had the post-election violence, and following that, there was the whole question of Agenda 4 that was set up by the Kofi Annan team. Now, in Agenda 4, one of the recommendations that was made was that we as a country have to reconcile. Remember, TGRC, one of the key pillars of that commission was reconciliation, justice, truth, and reconciliation. So why did we go out and raise a question on reconciliation? It's precisely because it was considered by experts at the time that unless this country reconciles, there is likely to be increased tensions across the country. Now, we wanted to ascertain before elections whether actually the country needs reconciliation, and we came up in previous findings that 93% of Kenyans wanted reconciliation. So after elections, we went back to the same question and asked Kenyans, do we need reconciliation? Do we feel that having had a peaceful election, do we feel like now we don't need election? So what's the answer? The answer is that many Kenyans feel that this country needs a reconciliation. And at a national level, we have, you will see on the booklets you have, we have a very high percentage saying that we need reconciliation. In some counties, as high as 90-something% feel like they need reconciliation. Now, that's very indicative. If you begin to interrogate those findings, the implications of those findings, unless we pay attention to what that means, then we might find that in the long term, these counties can transform themselves, metamorphosize into something else than what we actually intend or think they are going to be. Because if we Kenyans, if some parts of the country feel torn apart, feel they don't have that sense of trust and belonging, then how can we continue running, turning the same wheel that is not going the direction that the Constitution envisions for us? So that's one of the questions that we really have to sit back and ask ourselves. Now, one of the key elements that may lead to a reconciled country is the whole question of political parties. Now, political parties in this country, as we all know, some are national, some are not national, and we raised that in the research. whether people are happy in the formation of political parties as they are constituted now. And you can see that a large percentage of us Kenyans do not approve the fact that most of our political parties are regional, some are very tribal, some are even clan-based, not even tribal, they are clan-based. Now that sort of staircase for our political parties may actually increase tension in the long term, not in the short term, the long term, unless we begin to say, now that the elections are over, now that we can think soberly, now that we can look at where the country should be going, unless we begin to say, why do we have parties that we don't like? As voters, when we ask ourselves, will you like your party to be regional, to be tribal, to be local? Everyone says, no, 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 no. Of course, there's a percentage that agrees. They say, yes, there's nothing wrong with having a party from my tribe. And it's a small percentage if you look at the figures you have. But a large percentage feel like this is not the way we want to live. This is not the Kenya we want. Now, we have a contradiction. We have a tension. We, on one hand, we vote parties that come from our own regions and our own tribes. On the other, we don't want that kind of behavior, national behavior in terms of the way we vote. So we are what we call, we are entrapped. We, you know, like when you get a snake in your room and, you know, you just have to confront it. That kind of entrapment is what we are talking about in terms of how we feel with these national political parties. Maybe they are not national. So what are we saying? Political parties, if we want to progress, may have to rethink the whole Political Parties Act. And if you may remember what the Political Parties Act said, it said that every political party must have offices in at least 24 counties. Now, how many of our political parties have offices, functional offices, in at least 24 counties? Now, the fact that that was not done is showing itself in the findings that unless we begin to ask ourselves, shall we not question why this Political Parties Act is not enacted so that as a country, we don't have to look at each other, you know, which tribe are you from, which name are you bearing, you know, those sort of things. And don't forget that political parties are mechanisms of creating national unity and cohesion. They are mechanisms for promoting public discourse. They are very important institutions. And don't forget that we are paying them. We're paying for political parties in this country. It's not like they are doing us a favor. We're paying them. So why should we pay for something that we don't like? When it comes to voting, we vote the other way. But in terms of our own ideals, goals, so the question we are raising is, can we change this behavior within our own national arena? So I'll wish to stop there for now, and if there are questions, then we'll pick them up. But don't forget, there will be a conference Monday, Tuesday, and experts. We have invited many experts. For those of you who have not seen the program, we have senators, like Murkomen, who is very good in devolution. We have our emeritus AG, Amos Wako, people of great legal minds. We have several members of parliament who will come, heads of the civil societies and religious leaders, so we can put them to task on some of these issues. So you are very welcome. Thank you very much for listening.